Mr Speaker, I rise to speak in support of the private member's motion moved by the member for Nanango, and in doing so I also call on the Labor government to scrap its absurd policy that perversely rewards perpetrators of domestic and family violence. The Palaszczuk Labor government has extended taxpayer-funded leave by 10 extra days per year to perpetrators of domestic and family violence. Mr Speaker, if those opposite think it's acceptable to use hard-working taxpayer money to fund leave for these perpetrators, what on earth will be next? The Not Now, Not Ever report is a product of the LNP's Domestic Violence Task Force. I've read the recommendations made by the report. Nowhere does it say that perpetrators should be entitled to this leave. I'm a former police officer of 23 years and also an extremely proud white ribbon ambassador. Yesterday I found comments made by the Premier during question time extremely disrespectful and downright ignorant. In response to a question without notice, the Premier said, and I quote, "I'm very proud of the men on the government side who have signed up to be champions of prevention of domestic and family violence and the white ribbon cause," and then continued and said, "I'd like to see all male members of the House sign up as well." Well, Mr Speaker, if you look around this room on any given day, you'll see I am the only member of parliament who wears an ambassador's white ribbon daily to champion this cause. Every day. So much for bipartisanship from the Premier on this important matter. Domestic and family violence is something I take extremely seriously and something I hold very close to my heart. Domestic and family violence should not be about us as members of parliament. It should be above politics. And in my electorate in Bundaberg, domestic and family violence is a major concern and something I'm extremely aware of. My community, who chose me to be their representative in this House, count on me to support them, be their voice and fight to provide Bundaberg with what we need and deserve. And that's exactly what I'll do. I'm standing here today in support of Bundaberg. Bundaberg needs a second domestic and family violence liaison officer. Bundaberg needs help to combat domestic violence. And Bundaberg residents and their families who are victims of DV need support. But the Labor government just continues to do what they do best, reward the perpetrators with 10 days leave. Mr Speaker, this Labor government's policy is just another arrogant and out-of-touch move from those opposite, and quite frankly, it is unbelievable. Our fantastic Bundy police officers, local staff and volunteers of local community groups like Eden Place work tirelessly, selflessly and proactively to protect the victims of DV within our community. They are the ones who help victims get back on their feet. They do their absolute best with the minimal government support they are provided. They get on with it, and our community would be undeniably lost without them. One domestic and family violence liaison officer for the Bundaberg region is not enough. As an ex-police officer, I know firsthand how important it is to have sufficient staffing to assist with combating domestic violence in our community. To get the ball rolling, back in March I asked the Police Minister a question on notice to gain clarity on the government's plans in relation to their election promise to appoint a second DVLO for the Wide Bay region. But the Minister's response displayed a complete lack of urgency, simply advising the appointment would occur at some stage this financial year. And 5 months later, we're still yet to hear where that officer will be stationed and when they'll start. Our current Bundaberg Domestic Violence Liaison Officer, Sergeant Ken Hendry, started in this role over 10 years ago, and the number of domestic incidents being reported has massively increased in that decade. The workload and pressure on our DVLO continues to grow as the awareness on the issue improves, but staffing hasn't changed. A second officer will help our region immensely, but clearly the government would prefer to focus on the prizes given to those who have ruined the lives of so many. In the Wide Bay Burnett district in 2016-17, 715 domestic and family violence applications were made, and 1,644 breaches of domestic and family violence orders were reported. Something needs to give. Change needs to happen, and abolishing this ludicrous policy under discussion this evening would be a start. Without fail, each and every week, my office gets phone calls and visits from residents dealing with domestic violence. It's heartbreaking. The current Labor government has their priorities wrong. The LNP is the only party that will provide real action and real support for domestic violence victims and their families, and will not reward domestic violence perpetrators. And that is why, Mr Speaker, I support this private member's motion before us here this evening.
Call the member for Greenslopes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. One of the points that I've been proudest of this parliament, proudest to be a member of this parliament, was following the first debate